Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup number 365, which basically means I've done one a day for an entire standard year, which is kind of funny because when all is said and done, it takes about a full day to do these, not just to shoot and edit them, but also to prepare all of the posts, to deal with all of the posting and social media and all the stuff you got to do with it. So it really is like a full day's worth of work to get these out, not including all the other behind the scenes stuff that I end up doing. So this is like genuinely one full year of my life has been dedicated to the weekly roundup. And I got to say, it's mostly been freaking awesome. The people that I've met, all of the awesome things I've gotten to do. I talked a lot about it in the 300th, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just kind of wanted to take a quick moment to reflect upon one full year of my life just doing the weekly roundup. We had some guests in there, of course, as well, but it's just one of those things where it's kind of like it's a good milestone for me, at least. It's something I'm very proud of. And obviously none of this would ever happen if it wasn't for the people that watched, listened, and enjoyed getting everything, all their retro info from this podcast, and of course some of the other awesome ones that are out there as well. But so thank you all so much. Thanks to everybody who supported me. Thanks to the people that don't like me that much but still respect what I do and listen. You're pretty awesome as well. Not everybody's gonna like everybody else, but I just really appreciate everybody. So thank you all so much. And let's jump in with a fun one this week. First up is just a really fun and lighthearted one. Banjo Guy Ollie recently made a song out of clips from This Week in Retro podcast, and it absolutely made me smile. It's making me kind of giggle now just thinking about it. And it's just one of those happy songs that I think most people, when they listen to, would just kind of nod and smile and laugh at it. And even if it's the type of song you only listen to once, that's fine too. I would recommend listening, but it's really catchy as well. So I found myself humming it randomly, days after the first time I heard it. So I absolutely recommend listening to it. I would play a clip here, but I don't want to accidentally get flagged for stealing a clip of someone's content. So I'm just going to leave it linked down below. Trust me, you're just going to want to listen to this one. It's short, it's happy, it's free, so why not, right? Next up, a video was recently posted that showcased a bunch of homebrew games for a ton of different retro platforms that are either just released, coming out very soon, or coming out probably by the end of next year. And it was just a really cool way to have like a preview all in one place. So, of course you could probably hunt down information on all the different ones, but it was really awesome just kind of hitting play, sitting back with a drink and just watching all of the new homebrew stuff that's coming out. And I absolutely made a note of a few of them that I really wanted to keep an eye on because they looked absolutely awesome. Awesome. Wow, it's going to be a good one today, huh? Whew. But yeah, it features games from a ton of different consoles. The only thing that I would just remember going into this, certain consoles don't really look good in previews like this. And the number one is Virtual Boy, because they showed Formula V, which I played on a real Virtual Boy, and it looked amazing. Like, even if you don't like the Virtual Boy, if you looked at this game, you'd be like, holy crap, I didn't know that a Virtual Boy could look this good. However, whenever you run it through emulation and then send it up through YouTube compression, it really kills the look of it. So by no means am I criticizing the person who put this video together. I'm just saying it is what it is. And I want to just put that out there. And, obviously there's some things like handheld games don't always stretch great. So just keep that in mind when you're watching and really make it about the game and what type of games that you see here that you might want to play. Most of them look absolutely great, by the way. I just kind of wanted to put that out there because whenever I see games like Formula V up on YouTube, including the stuff that I have done, by the way, I just look at it and go, oh man, that's not how it looks. I wish we could present it to people in a way where they could really feel what it would be like to play it on a Virtual Boy, but nope. So anyway, if you're interested to see what's about to come around the corner for homebrew from a ton of different consoles, definitely check this video out because it kind of has it all in one place. 8-Bit Dough have just opened pre-orders on a Neo Geo style controller that contains a clicky D-pad. And everything about this controller seems to be pretty awesome. First, 8-Bit Dough claims that they spent a long time, over a year, trying to exactly reverse engineer the Neo Geo CD controller. They tried to get that clicky D-pad correct, and they also added some shoulder triggers. So that's the standard 4 buttons, select and start on the front with 2 more shoulder triggers. It also can connect to devices via a USB-C connection, wirelessly via RF using a USB wireless dongle that it comes with, and it has Bluetooth built in as well. So this should be able to work on most devices. They're claiming it works with Android, Windows, and the Neo Geo Mini, which to me probably means it's also fully compatible with the Mister, but not the Switch. I'm sure they would have mentioned Switch compatibility if that was there. But 8-Bit Do's also been known for doing firmware updates that add functionality, so maybe it will be compatible. The price is $25 for the black version, which is the one I got because I wanted to save some money. However, there are King of Fighters themed controllers for $40. It's all the same link, so just click the same link in the description and then just choose whichever model you want. And when I posted about this, a lot of KOF fans were really excited that they got to have that style controller. So honestly, this really seems like nothing but positive. This seems awesome. I'm looking forward to getting it at a $25 price point. If it's fine and not better than fine, I'm still happy. There's still many different uses for it. If it ends up being really good, that's an awesome price point. And if this was $100, there's no way I would take the gamble on that. But for 25 or 40, if you like the KOF themed ones, I felt like this was a worthy buy. My only complaint is that they once again have not posted any lag test results. And it's extra annoying because 8-Bit Do's had some very good performing controllers. So it's not like they're trying to hide some high lag piece of crap from us. They should be proud to brag about some of their lag numbers. And I know it gets complicated. How are you going to say USB lag is one thing when you could plug it into an old computer that's slow and you might get a lot more lag? I get that, but I really do wish that more controller companies would take the time to post that. And I think they all are just sick of hearing me talk at them. So if you care about that stuff, you're going to have to ask them politely, I hope, but ask them on social media. Just tag them directly and say, or retweet my post that tagged them and just say, hey, what are the lag test numbers on this? Here's a link to Pork's sheet that has all of your previous lag test numbers. How does this compare? What's in here? And hopefully, eventually, companies would care enough to do that. So I've spoken to at least one other company about it who seemed excited at the proposition, and then I heard nothing back from them. So let's just keep pushing because, especially push companies that do a good job anyway. Why wouldn't you want to brag about that? But I'll step off my soapbox. The controller looks great. The price is great. I would feel confident buying it and just hoping it works well. And it should arrive in about a month. So it's not like it's a year ahead. You'll definitely get it by the end of the summer. So the price is right. I'm definitely happy I bought this one. Products from Terraonion are now either back in stock at Stone Age Gamer or available to pre-order, and they should arrive by the end of the year. If you were waiting on any of these things, I guess now's probably the time to pick them up because they've been out of stock for a while. And I do understand how many people don't really like the company. So there's alternatives for absolutely every one of these if you choose to just go somewhere else. That's totally understandable. But it's my job just to make sure that I let everybody know what's available and when, and I kind of just treat it like that. So totally understand if these products aren't for you, but if you were waiting on them, I just wanted to let you know, provide the links, and just kind of let you go from there. The HD15 to SCART converters are finally back in stock, and this was another project that was really hampered by the part shortage, and I really didn't think D-sub connectors would be something that would be really hard to get, but they're here, they're ready, and I'm very glad that they're back in stock because they're the perfect use for a couple of different scenarios, and they're a very good use for a bunch of others. I did a whole video on it if you want to see a pretty in-depth video, but I'll give you the short version here. Anytime that you have either a D-sub output, so a VGA style, but outputs 15 kilohertz, so 240p or 480i, this would be a very good and safe way to get it into a SCART device. Because if you flip the switch to RGBS mode, it makes sure that the voltage on the sync line isn't too high. Because very often when you get sync out of a D-sub connector, it's TTL higher voltage level, and you always want to put 75 ohm level TV level voltage sync through SCART devices. So right there, that'll work. It's got a 3.5 millimeter jack, so you could route audio through it as well. But it also has a passive sync combiner using an XNOR circuit. So if you have a 15 kilohertz RGB HV that you want to make RGBS to go to SCART, or if you just have a SCART-based device like the RetroTink 5X that could accept 480p over SCART, that's how you get VGA into your Tink 5X. So if you have a cheap Dreamcast cable, which, by the way, a bunch of those cheap Dreamcast VGA cables are totally fine. A bunch of them are complete garbage that'll end up with interference on the screen. But if you took the gamble and you ended up with a decent one, buying this device and plugging it into your Tink 5X would be a perfectly good way to interface that together. So also, if you have any of the Mr. I/O boards or direct video, or you're using the analog DAC, that is the perfect device because it makes sure that the sync level is correct. And if you're using a Mister, it doesn't even matter what the switch is set to, because both will work. So basically, if you're, take a look at this, take a look at the video, but I love this device. This was the original circuit was come up with by Steve from HD Retrovision. Tian Fong did the design on this, and it's just been, it sits next to me in a box right there. I have two of them, and there hasn't been a week that's gone by that I haven't used them for some project that I was working on. So it's been one of my favorite tools to have. And if you're a tinkerer, or if you have any solution like the ones you just heard me talk about, this is probably for you. A new NES game called Full Quiet was just released, and it's also available on the Switch, the Xbox Series X, and Xbox One, as well as just getting it on Steam and playing it on PC. There's also 3 cartridge versions that are available, ranging from an $80 limited edition to a $50 cartridge only, and I think there was one in the middle that also had a complete in box, but standard edition, not the limited edition. If you want to see what the game is about, John Riggs posted about a 20-minute video on the Switch version, and it looks really awesome. Now, I did receive a copy. A friend of mine was kind enough to dropship one to me, which, by the way, thank you to everybody who does that, because people who I'm friends with have been buying stuff, but having it sent to me so that I'm able to check stuff out without having to absolutely spend every penny I have to test things that I might not necessarily keep or need. So thank you for that. But unfortunately, the version I got has only half a beveled PCB. Now, these were made by Infinite Nest Lives, and normally the PCBs that come out of there are perfect. So I don't want to throw shade. I just want to kind of get everybody on the same very level-headed page on this one. If you pick up this game, Full Quiet, and you get the NES cart, just check the PCB on it. You don't have to open it up, just turn it upside down. I have a video that I posted on social media that shows how absolutely beautiful the game is, but it also kind of zooms in and shows the bevel on it. Now, one trick might actually be using your cell phone in macro mode and taking a couple of pictures or a video like I did to really see if it's bezeled. But that's all you really have to do, is just kind of take a couple of pictures. And if both sides of the PCB are beveled, cool. Just leave it alone and don't do anything. You have yourself an awesome game. If just one side or neither of the side is beveled, if you want to reach out to Paul from Infinite Nest Lives, they'll replace that for free for you, which is just awesome. It just really shows the integrity that company has. And, once again, this is a company that makes great stuff. This is not cash grab stuff. This is a company with a history of good products. So, everybody makes mistakes, right? It's how you handle those mistakes that should define you. So don't get mad if you get a PCB that's not perfect. You could just decide to use it. A half beveled PCB isn't the worst thing. No bevel at all is pretty bad though, because what you end up actually doing is every time you insert that cartridge, you smash the pins as it's going in. Now, the very positive part about this is that the NES has a 72-pin connector that is incredibly easy to change compared to other consoles. If you have to replace the cartridge slot on like a Sega Genesis, you have to desolder a ton of pins. It's a massive pain. You could definitely end up ruining the motherboard in the process, whereas the NES, you just need a Phillips head screwdriver and some patience. You do need to find a 72-pin connector that doesn't stink, which is really kind of always a hard thing to do. But so it's not the end of the world, and it's not like as soon as you plug it in, it's just going to destroy your NES. However, if you have an original 72-pin connector that's been working fine, a non-beveled PCB could really be the final nail in the coffin. So use your own discretion, right? If you just put a brand new 72-pin connector in and you get a half beveled PCB, maybe you're not going to care. Maybe you're going to play it a couple of times and just leave it on yourself as a beautiful NES game to look at. But you do have the option to swap it out for free. So I probably rambled a bit too long about that, but sometimes we stumble across issues, and it's frustrating because sometimes the manufacturer gives you some answer like, oh, that doesn't matter. That Bob guy is just lying for clicks. And it's very frustrating because all we're talking about is nerd stuff that's very clear. And that's the opposite of what happened here. Paul basically was like, "Hey, must have missed that in QA. Sorry, we'll fix it." So I just wanted to make it very clear that it is not the worst thing in the world that I've seen. And Paul, it's not every single cartridge either. You have to check yours to see. Yours is probably fine, but overall, I don't think this is a negative, and especially for such an awesome looking game that came in a really nice box. So I just wanted to be very, very clear that if you ended up getting one that wasn't fully beveled, it's, just contact Paul and you'll get it swapped out. But overall, the rest of this looked absolutely awesome. The special edition box looked beautiful. The cartridge itself looked great. The manual was cool. And the game, once again, the game itself looked good. So check out John Riggs' video if you want more info on it. And if you already purchased one, just double check the cartridge when you get it. And if you're about to purchase one, just keep in mind that it's probably going to be fine. Be confident in your purchase, but double check it anyway. And to be perfectly honest, every new retro game that you buy that's cartridge based, you should be double checking anyway. Even the retrobit ones that have been completely solid for a long time now, why not, right? And post pictures online and let people know, because every dev and every manufacturer that takes the time to make things right would probably want you to brag about how they're well made. So always double check and always feel free to share. And it's always nice to know, especially if you see a bunch of social media threads like, "Hey, got my new cartridge. Look at this sweet bevel." Like, at least yours is probably going to be well built as well. Chris from Displaced Gamers recently posted a video that talks about why the NES has sprite flicker and some of the sprite limitations that you see. So if you've ever played an NES game, you might notice when a bunch of characters are all on the screen at the same time in the same place on the screen, there's a flicker to them. And the very basic explanation is because there's a limitation to how many sprites could be on one line at one time. So if horizontally they're in the same place, it'll alternate between which character ends up actually getting drawn on screen, resulting in a flicker. So this video kind of goes into explaining why the system is limited to 8 sprites on a scan line, as well as both how the sprite limitation and sprite priority are used by programmers to add some features to some games that you might have played before or you might be working on. So while this one's a bit more technical than most and probably geared towards people who want to develop NES games, as usual with Displaced Gamers, I would recommend this to anybody who's just curious about how this stuff works. And if you're like me, you probably will end up rewinding spots a couple of times just to make sure that you get it. But I do really enjoy them because it's kind of like peeking behind the curtain and figuring out how some of these games work and why they are the way they are. So as usual, great job by Chris. And as always, thanks for doing the write-up yourself, because whenever I did the write-up on these, it was exactly what you would expect when a non-programmer tried to talk about programmery things. It was embarrassing. So it's really nice to have a very good description in here from Chris. So thank you again. Replacement sticks for your CDI remote are now available for only $5 plus shipping. So I guess the CDI remote controls, the wireless RF remotes with the analog thumbstick on them, those thumbsticks tend to wear out and break over time, and they are just kind of screw-on things, so you could very easily replace them. It doesn't require a full disassembly or anything like that. So somebody went out and decided to make their own to kind of help CDI fans out. And there are 2 available, one in black for just $5, and then a limited edition blue if you like a glowing thumbstick on your CDI remote control. And either way, I mean, it's one of these things that it solves a problem. The price is very good. So it's something that's worth looking into if you own a CDI and maybe your thumbstick on your remote's starting to wear out. Funny enough, I have never, ever used a CDI remote. I've owned 4 or 5 of them, and I've owned, or at least had through my office, my house, whatever, I've had at least 5 or 6 CDIs come through here, probably more than that, and not once has the remote ever worked. And some of them I tried taking apart and making sure the contacts were clean, making sure the circuit boards didn't look like they were burnt out. So it's just kind of funny to me because I've talked to people on the CDI Discord before, and I've talked to friends who owned CDIs, and they kind of look at me like, what do you mean, how do you get the remote working. Because I was talking to Yahel from Wrestling with Gaming once, like, is there a receiver that you plug in? And he's like, what are you talking about? There wasn't a receiver on your VCR. Why would you need a receiver on this? So yeah, I just have gotten very unlucky. So maybe someday I'll get to experience the compact disc interactive multimedia unit with its original intended remote. But for now, if you have a working remote, use this. Also, I'm a man-child sometimes and had an absolute blast writing this silly post. Hopefully it made you laugh. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm just going to skim through these, and if you hear anything that piques your interest, please go back and check out Lou's video for all the details and visual examples. First up, sad news for the NARC core. It looks like there's not enough bandwidth to cover everything in the core, so Pramod has to use dual SD RAM at the moment to try to get around that. So I guess when this eventually goes into beta testing, or if you're able to test it now, you'll need a dual RAM mister. However, Pramod's going to try to work around the bandwidth limitations. And that was already accomplished with other platforms that were thought to potentially only be able to run with dual RAM sticks. So that's just something to think about. Most of us, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, because if you end up having cores that you really want to play, and what you would need to replace on your mister isn't as big of a deal. It's not like you would have to throw out what you already bought and buy all new stuff. So if we all start to hear more cores requiring dual RAM, it's not the end of the world, but I do hope some developers would be able to kind of find some tricks in order to get that working. Next up, Benj Edwards recently posted about an FPGA-based pin-compatible 6502 replacement that could run up to 100 megahertz. The developer currently has no plans to make this into a commercial project, but does provide documentation on building your own. There's supply issues with the FPGA chip, because of course there are. Stephanie Allaire did this a while back for the Yamaha sound chip, and while it was actually more expensive than trying to pick up some used sound chips, I absolutely love that people are doing this, and I hope this starts to trickle down to other stuff. One thing that comes to mind are some proprietary chips on arcade hardware that have been implemented in FPGA, and if they're able to make replacements that can solder directly onto original boards, that's great, because there really aren't any other alternatives unless you cannibalize multiple broken boards. But this is definitely something I would like to see trickle down, and eventually it'll be something that you'll probably need. At the moment, finding used chips laying around pulled from other stuff is probably going to be cheaper and easier, but not for long. So thanks to anybody who's working on that stuff. Next up, Robert has some very good news for the N64 core. He's already finished the FPU implementation, which is kind of crazy. Robert just works like lightning through a lot of this stuff. So while no, that does not mean that we have a working N64 core yet, it's coming along a heck of a lot faster. So, please consider throwing them a donation, or a subscription, I should say, on Patreon, because that's just really cool to see that coming along. Next up, Shane Lynch looked at the Sega Pika core, where that project was left off, and was just kind of taking a look and saying, hey, the audio is pretty close, so maybe that's going to still be something that's worked on soon. Hotego recently released a maintenance update for the System 16 core, fixing a bunch of issues in many games. And there's also support for Mike's YC video output, which I'll talk about later on as well. The next game in the Mr. FPGA Discord game challenge is the original Donkey Kong arcade game. Somebody call Steve Wiebe, and somebody hopefully make Billy Mitchell cry. Next up, and lastly, Attract 17 announced the beta release of Phantasm, aka Avenging Spirit, for the Mega System 1 core, written by Darren O. And there's also an update to Prehistoric Isle with some bug fixes. So as usual, thanks so much to Lou for doing all of this. There's no way I would be able to keep up with all of this awesome stuff that's been going on in the Mr. scene, and there's so much awesome stuff going on in that scene. So thank you again, Lou. Please subscribe to his channel. Next up, I just did a stream with James from Retro HQ demoing 2 new products that are about to go on sale. I want to start with that. They are not available for purchase yet. If you go to the links in this description, probably the day that this comes out, it's going to say out of stock, but it's not sold out. It just hasn't gone up for sale yet. So I wanted to do kind of like a pre-sale stream, just so people could check out the summary here, or right here on this podcast. If you want to watch the entire stream, that's up to you, but I'll summarize everything right here, just so you can get an idea of what it is before you buy it. But both are very awesome products. The first is an Atari 7800 game drive. It's a ROM cart that's very similar to Crix's RGB blaster, but also a ROM cart, and it plugs into the 7800, allows you to run 7800 and 2600 games, but it also gets you RGBS output from a Genesis 2 connector and back. We checked compatibility with everything, and it worked with everything except the OSSC. So the RetroTink 5X, 2X SCART, 2X Pro, Rad 2X, HD Retrovision cables all worked perfect. Just going through the OSSC with RGB SCART, there were some issues. And we think that was related to the sync circuit. There is no safety issues. Everything should be totally fine with this. It's only just a matter of shaping that signal up. So I think maybe the next run, James is going to try to correct that. But really, there's only one scenario in which I ran into any issues, and that's RGB SCART with the OSSC. Everybody else should have no problems at all. And it might even be worth picking up if you do have an OSSC, because that could have also just been the combination of that and my capture card, which anybody that owns an OSSC knows that sometimes the compatibility isn't the best with stuff. Everything about it performed great. It had a bunch of features that I thought were awesome, including all support for all additional audio chips, which means Ricky and Vicky worked. And I believe this is the only way you could play it without an original cart. Just for the record, we got permission from the creator to play this. We didn't steal the game in order to show this off here, but I thought it was really good. And by the way, that's a great game. I had never played it before. That was definitely a cool one. Also, it had a bunch of things like in-game menus, save states. If you're using the controller adapter, which I'll get back to in a second, but if you're using a controller adapter with the Genesis 6-button controller, there are single button presses for save and restore states, which was absolutely awesome. There's also blending modes that could soften the image to kind of look like composite video, which in most cases, if you're getting RGB out, you wouldn't want that. But there were a few games we tested that didn't look right at all. They were just weird and kind of hurt your eyes in RGB because they were designed to have that blurry blending of RF and composite when you're using them. So that was an awesome feature as well. It also had cheat support, which we demoed, which was kind of cool. And there will also be firmware updates. We showed that. It's a very easy process. So overall, I just thought it was absolutely awesome. If you have a 7800 and you're looking to continue to use your original hardware, you would want to seriously consider this. Also, just the thought of another plug-and-play RGB adapter. No mods whatsoever. You plug this cartridge in, and now you have RGB support. I love it. And I really do hope that Crix would consider an all-in-one version of his RGB blaster after seeing how smooth this was, especially for the NES. I think that would be really cool if he came out with something like that for it. But the other thing that we demoed was the Mega 7800. So this is a controller adapter that allows you to use Genesis 3 and 6-button controllers or arcade sticks or whatever else, as well as Master System controllers in the SMS light gun, all on the Atari 7800. And the way it works is you just connect everything up, and as soon as you press a button or pull the trigger on the light gun, it auto detects what the controller is, which worked perfect. So plug everything in, hit a button, the light will change to match the correct controller that's been plugged in. And also with light guns, the only thing you might run into is wait a few seconds, wait for a brighter screen, aim at the screen, and pull the trigger again. Obviously, light guns only work on CRTs. There's no crazy magic here that's going to make this work on a flat panel. But that was, I would not call that an issue. I would just call that just keep in mind if you're playing a light gun game, just wait until that adapter turns the correct color, shoot it at the screen a couple times, and then you could be in your game. And that demoed perfectly as well. There were zero issues with that. The light gun thing is just a keep in mind type of thing. But these products were absolutely awesome. So I was very happy that I was able to do this stream with James. If you haven't seen the interview I did with him a couple of years ago, it's still relevant to a lot of the stuff that's going on today. And he's always a fun guy to listen to and has a very storied history. So it's always great hanging out with him and kind of just having a chat. He answered a bunch of great questions in the chat about the development of this and some other stuff. And I guess the only other things to note is there were a couple of 7800 games that might have glitches if you use it with this cart. And all you have to do is turn off the in-game menu before loading, and that completely fixed it. I think we demoed it with Miss Pac-Man. So, I mean, it just performed great. And, the only issue might be the sync thing, but that should not be a safety issue. It could just be a compatibility issue with the OSSC. So overall, if you're a fan of original consoles in the 7800, read through this post. If you really want to sit through the live stream, you're welcome to, but this post summarizes absolutely everything way shorter. But you do in that live stream get a lot of cool chat from James and behind the scenes stuff. So feel free to listen to that as well. But overall, I'm calling this one a huge win. And as soon as it goes on sale, I will repost and then also post on social media. I try to be on all the social medias and I try to post immediately, but it's always best if you just keep an eye on RetroRGB.com. And, as soon as this thing goes up for sale, I'll make sure to let everybody know. Before I go, I want to talk about a little snafu I had on a live stream a couple days ago. It is embarrassing and frustrating, but it was my fault. So I was testing a couple of new things from Retro Castle. I was testing a SCART to composite and S-video converter that has a variable capacitor. So you could dial in composite video per console. And while it'll never be as good as native composite from a console, it's the best RGB to composite converter I have ever seen yet, only tied with the one that's built into the Retro Castle case. So it works perfect, but this is an external box. There's just one or two tweaks that need to be made, and then hopefully it'll be a product that you could purchase. Retro Castle also has stuff on their store right now that works great for S-video, but maybe not so much for composite. Or, you just get that same kind of shimmery thing that you would normally get, which is not anybody's fault. It's just the way composite video is generated. So none of the makers of these devices, Mike G, Ashen, Jam, they're all kind of in the same boat. Now, unfortunately, though, here's what I got wrong in the stream. Both of the things I tested that converted RGB to S-video and composite were great, but I wanted to test the new Retro Castle case that has Mike Simone's circuit built in with a Sega Saturn mini DIN, meaning that you could just treat it like the external adapter, but plug in any Sega Saturn cable, S-video, composite, RGB, and then just kind of go and do whatever, whichever output you want. And unfortunately, I hadn't tested this since the last time I did a live stream when it was still beta. And I didn't realize that Sorg had added a feature that's pretty handy, but was not clear in the instructions, in that if you set the Mr. INI file to composite to CVBS, that's actually designed if you want to make a custom cable that looks pretty terrible, to be honest, but it's good if you're just like, hey, I need to do a quick test. Let me cut up a VGA cable and make a composite adapter out of it. But it's not meant for any of the code for Mike Simone stuff. So you have to set your Mr. INI file to S-video, even if you're using composite, because Mike's circuit is a Lumatrap that takes S-video and makes it composite. So the entire stream, right, I probably wasted an hour of people's time. I couldn't get it to work through the Tink 5X correctly. It looked okay on an RGB monitor, and I'm trying to follow the directions exactly. I checked the Mr. INI file. Lou came to my rescue and jumped in and had a couple of tips for me. He was the one that reminded me you don't access it through the GUI anymore. You access it through the Mr. INI file, which we'll get back to that. But and the final mistake was that I had to set it to S-video in the Mr. INI file, even though I was using composite. Now, Wizzo's script, the remote script, or the remote access, automatically edits your INI file with a GUI and explains all of this. But I still wasn't quite understanding it during the stream. So totally my fault on that one. I should have checked with Mike before the stream. But to be honest, most of the time when I do these, it's like I'm scrambling doing a million things and I'm like, oh wow, I have nothing that I have to do for the next 2 hours. Let me stream right now while I have the time. I never am able to really plan these out, rarely at least. So sorry to everybody that I may have sent down a rabbit hole for this. The Retro Castle case with the Mike Simone circuit built in worked perfect. after the stream was over, as soon as I figured out what I did wrong, that's when I plugged it all back in, and it looked great through the Tink. It looked great through the RGB monitor. So I made this stream unlisted because there's just so much bad information in it. I left a disclaimer and everything like that as well, but the only good information in this stream is the two converters that Ivory from Retro Castle built. But one of them has already been out and I did a video on, and the other one's still a prototype. So I'll revisit those when the newer one is ready for purchase. But the only thing I have to ask, and please, please, please correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of really smart people that listen to this, and I never mind being wrong, but why do we have to access an INI file for all of this? If you have your MiSTer set up to, by default, always output RGB, and then you have to go in when you boot it to the menu to switch, here's what should happen. If you're actually using component video, you do have to switch that switch on your I/O board, but you still would get video. It just, the colors would be all crazy, maybe a little wonky, but it should be good enough where you could switch it between RGB and component video. And then for S-Video and composite via Mike's Core or composite direct via the extra thing that was added, all of those should be black and white until you select them. So unless I'm wrong, unless I'm missing something, you should be, or Sorge should be able to set it so that you don't need those lines in the INI file at all anymore. You just boot your MiSTer and it'll either look like crap or look black and white, but you can still see it, and then select which video output you want and go from there. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm missing something. But I think the only thing that really should be in the INI file is RGBS versus RGB-HV. Probably should default to RGBS because that's how the majority of us are using it. And anybody that's going to be doing a mixed solution would probably know that they should switch it. But please let me know your thoughts, because it's one of those things where, I read the instructions over and over. I read the documentation, and since it had changed since the last time I did it, I was really going by what I read, and what I read told me to do not what I needed to do. And this seems like a problem that could be so easily solved in a GUI. So, obviously, I'm the biggest fan of the MiSTer project and all of the contributors. So while this is constructive criticism, it's not an insult, right? It's my job it's always been, for 20 years almost, my job to go into a technical environment and kind of be the middleman of what's kind of best for both the devs and the users. And that seems to be a big one. But, maybe I'm wrong. So let me know your thoughts. Maybe Sorge could consider adding that to a future update and then just ignoring any of the lines in the INI file that have it, just so that make it easier for people. But either way, just to reiterate one last time, the current Retro Castle case that does RGB to S-Video and composite conversion is awesome. That's the one that's been out for a while. The new adapter, which is not available for sale, needs a tweak or two, but will be the go-to adapter for external box RGB to composite and S-Video. The other ones were great for S-Video, but this is the one that you would want to get for composite because you could dial in the signal. That is not available yet, and I will do another stream, video, whatever, when it is available. And I don't know if the Retro Castle case with the Mike Simone circuit is in there yet. I'll leave a link to the main Retro Castle store so you could check that out. But that also worked perfectly with the native composite and S-Video output using a Saturn cable, as long as you set the MiSTer INI file correctly, like I did not in the stream. So sorry to anybody whose time I wasted in that. At least the conversion stuff was all accurate. It's just the pass-through wasn't. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity here to ramble about it, but I'll just tuck tail and walk away apologizing for getting that one wrong. Well, that's it for this time. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially people that support, because it's really you that keeps all of this stuff going. I can't thank you enough. A year's worth of my life has been dedicated to this, and it's really you all that allow it to happen. So thank you all so much. Please spread the word, and hopefully we can get more people involved in this. And as always, if you have any feedback, I'm all ears. Just because you make a suggestion doesn't necessarily mean I'll change my mind or anything, but I always listen. I always take your feedback to heart, and I'm always trying to improve. So let's try to grow this thing a little more, and let's just try to keep this going. But thank you again for a year's worth of my life of Roundups. This has been awesome.